Hey guys, how's it going? Today I'm planting up my very first spring containers of the season. This is always a really exciting time because it kind of signals the beginning of outside projects. You know, we're getting very, very close. Now, it's still a little bit too early to put out stuff like this. In fact, I was able to be down at the garden center this week when we received the very first load of flowers for the season, including these Ice and Roses white hellebores, which is going to be the centerpiece of this arrangement here. Big, glorious white flowers with the dark green foliage and the red stems. I just think they're such an interesting plant, but these are clearly way further along than the hellebores out in my garden. So you want to wait until nighttime temperatures are above freezing consistently before you toss out plants that are pre-grown, because these are just not acclimated to temperatures lower than that. If you had a really protected spot, like our front porch, it's kind of enclosed in a way. It's very protected from the wind. It's on the south side of our house. It gathers up a lot of heat during the day. They would probably be okay in that area, but otherwise I would wait until you've got consistent temps above freezing to put them out, especially if the containers are more exposed. I'm going to be planting these up and then leaving them in the greenhouse for a couple of weeks until I feel like it's more safe to put them outside. Also, with spring containers, just like with fall containers, you can really pack them full of stuff because there's just not enough heat to encourage enough growth that these things are going to get overgrown and overtake each other. And oftentimes we take these spring planters apart in favor for some summer stuff later on. Like these hellebores, they're going to just be blooming for the spring. So we'll enjoy them in this container, then we'll pop them out, plant them in the landscape for the summer, and plant new things in here for the summer. Before we plant, we have to prep our container. So I want to go over the steps on how to handle a container like this that has a lot of open pieces on the side. Now this looks like it's watertight, but it's not. This top piece screws on right here, so water will come out the bottom. And then the fact that we have open sides right here and what we're going to be lining it with will still allow a lot of oxygen exchange, so it'll keep the roots very happy. So what I have here in the bowl is some sheet moss. I just buy it in a bulk box, and I've pre-moistened it because it makes it easier to mold, and it comes apart in kind of these nice big pieces. Quite nice. And then we're going to take these and we are just going to mold them, kind of letting part of it overlap the top there, mold them to the sides. See how that kind of just blocks the openings. So that's what we're going to do along the whole interior, and then we have one more layer before we put soil in. So let's just continue doing this. Oh, it's beautiful. Okay, the next layer after we have our moss in is burlap. Now I usually have a stack of used burlap sacks that I get pots or concrete pieces wrapped in when they arrive, and I just hang on to them because I use them in our root cellar. I use them in projects like this. You can get rolls of burlap fairly inexpensively, I think at the craft store or maybe even at a box store, like a home improvement store maybe. But we are going to do, so this is one side of the burlap sack. I cut it apart already. We're going to gently pop this down. Whoops. Trying not to snag any of the moss. And what this does, this helps keep the moss kind of molded to the sides while helping soil kind of stay in, but it's also breathable. Technically, you would only really need one layer in there. That does a pretty good job, but just to be sure, I'm going to pop a second piece in there. And this is how I line a lot of containers. If a container is going to be inside, I'll actually use a piece of plastic like a garbage sack in here inside the burlap, and then I'll slash drainage holes in the bottom, and that way it helps any water from escaping outside along the sides of the container, and it just goes down through the bottom. It's more controlled. And we're just going to leave all of this looking like this until we're done planting, and then we're going to finish it. So I'm going to grab soil. I did grab a bag. Some organic potting mix. We don't need a ton because I've got quite a few root balls to work with here. Okay, we're going to start with that much, and we'll add a little bit if we need to. Hellebores are notoriously hard to manipulate in terms of root balls, and they don't really like to have their root balls messed with an awful lot, so we try to be careful with those, because if you've seen me plant containers before, I usually manhandle plants pretty good and rough up their roots really well, but with these we're going to be more careful. Okay, oftentimes they're really hard to get out of their pots too. I hope that's not the case. Nope. But look at that root ball. Look at that. That's intense. My goodness. So I'm just going to give it a slight teas at the bottom. That's it. I think this is a perfect shape because I'm putting 3 in here. And the fun part, like hellebores are not the most inexpensive plants out there, but they're such an amazing perennial out in the landscape that I love using them in containers in the spring, and I don't mind spending the extra because of how much they give me later on. Oh my, look at this root system. Look at that. They are just intense plants. Okay, here we go. Tuck that one in. And then I'm going to spin this so you can see this third one going in. Boy, it's gorgeous already. Okay. And let's see, I want to make sure that the leaves and flowers are facing the way I want them to. Oh, that looks so beautiful. I'm going to pop a little bit more soil in between each one of these root balls, now that I know how much space they're going to take up, because the rest of our root balls are pretty small. Need to spin it quick. Yeah, this side's definitely more open. This last hellebore wasn't as fluffy. Okay, our next layer are going to be these variegated periwinkle. This is Wojo's Gem. So we're going for a very kind of tonal white and green and kind of chartreuse sort of look here. We're going to put 3 of these in between each one of the hellebore root balls. So that one I'll give a little tease to the root ball. We're going to pop it right here along the edge. Again, we're going to be addressing the burlap and moss in the end. The second one, I need to build this up a little bit more. The sides are a little higher than it looks. There we go. And next we have a mossy saxifrage called Alpino Early Lime. Look at how beautiful and delicate these flowers look. Love them with these hellebores. I'm going to put these kind of right in front, kind of like that, right in front of the hellebore. Just tuck them right in. And then we have Ice-Turina Golden Sage, which gives you a really soft kind of sagey green, but then you get the chartreuse margin around those leaves. These are also perennial, so are all of these are. We can use all of these out in the landscape after we're done with them in this container. Tuck that in there. I'm going to be fussing with it too, as I kind of can see it from the front a little better, making sure each one of these plants can be seen really well. And then the very last plant we're putting in is this bright green gold spike moss, which is a zone 6 through 9. Now, I don't know how well this would do for us here in such a dry climate. I think it'll do great in a container because they tend to get more moisture, but we'll just have to see. Maybe if I find a really shady, more moist spot, we'll have some good luck. And that we'll tuck in right in here. Doesn't that bring a nice bright pop to the whole arrangement? Love it. Now at this point, we're going to go in with our scissors and I'm going to cut the excess burlap. I'm going to leave enough to where I can kind of tuck it over the root balls of the plant, but we don't want, like right back here, or right here rather, you can see we've got way too much. We don't need this much. So I'm just going to take my time and cut around all of these plants. It's just nice to wait until this step. I know it feels like you could do it before, but it's much easier to manipulate plants and with bigger pieces of burlap, because oftentimes if you cut it before and you're pushing plants down in the container, it can make the burlap go down further than you want it to. So I just prefer to wait. Before I tuck all of the burlap in, I'm just going to fuss with the plants a bit just to make sure that all the root balls are covered with soil really well. Everything's tucked in and nice and cozy. I found a spot already. I think I've got soil tucked around everything now. So what you do is you go in and you just kind of fold the burlap over the front of the root balls, and then you take that extra moss and also fold it on top of the burlap and the root balls. You may need to add a little bit of extra moss in order to make it all the way around. Like I've got a spot where it's a little bit bare. Right here, let me see if I can spin it. See right here, I think I might need more soil there too. Hold on. A little bit more soil. Burlap is tucked. Moss is over. And I'm going to add a little extra. Make sure we're covered here. Okay, I think we're done. I'm gonna give it a once over because sometimes, like right here, you'll have a little bit kind of popping out of one of the holes on the side, and you can kind of just tuck that in. When it's wet, it's really easy to do that, and then it kind of dries to shape. But this is so perfect because oxygen has a chance to go through that burlap, through the moss, keep the roots really happy. It will still drain a little bit from the bottom. We'll still be pretty careful. None of these, except for that spike moss, I think, need a ton of water. So I can be a little bit selective about where I put the water. When I water it, I'll just water right through the spike moss and then let the rest of the plants kind of soak up the extra. I think it's absolutely beautiful. So that's planter number one. Now we're gonna do a second planter. It's a smaller size. We're gonna go through the same process. I'm gonna use slightly different plants. So I think we'll put it together and then I'll just give you a tour of plants in the end. Second one is done. I think they look absolutely beautiful together. The only plant that I did repeat in this second one so that they would look cohesive, not just in color, but in a little bit of plant selection, is the gold spike moss right here. I think that really brings a pop and you can see it in both containers really well. Now the centerpiece here is a Blue Arrows Juncus, which is a perennial. They get about 3 feet tall, 12 inches wide. They will not do that in this container here. In order for it to look beefy enough to be a centerpiece, I did use 3 4-inch of those Juncus. And then I have 3 Ranunculus. They're a white sprinkles is the variety name. And these are technically perennial. I think in maybe zone 7. I can dig the bulbs, corms, and I can save them with my other Ranunculus and grow them again next year. But they are a beautiful, wonderful spring plant to use, and they provide so many blooms and so much color. And then I used some white pansies here. Now, I did have to go grab 3 extra plants because I kind of underestimated how many plants I needed for this container. And technically, in order to make it look as full as this one, I could have used maybe some ivy or something a little bit more fluffy, but I grabbed some of these beautiful little pale yellow violas. And I think there's enough yellow, like in the center of the hellebore, that it really goes well. I just love the tonal display. I think it looks really good in these metal baskets in particular. And I'm going to create kind of a display around these. They'll probably be together and staggered like this. And then I'll put a few other things around just to create a beautiful spring kind of vignette in here. So the thing I really love about these containers, one, I love to pack stuff in like this. I think it's really pretty. I don't do that on every single container that I put together. But like we went over all of the zones and how I can reuse these, many of these are perennial in our garden. So we get to use them not just in these containers and enjoy them really at their peak beauty during the spring, but then we can tuck them into the landscape and enjoy them for years to come. The only ones that I will not be reusing in the in the landscape most likely are the pansies and violas, and that's only 6 out of all the plants that we use today. The moss can be reused. In fact, technically, or typically rather, I leave the moss lining these containers, and I'll pop the root ball out, which might be stuck to the burlap a little bit, but that's okay. I can put new burlap in and just reuse the moss over and over again. It will fade a bit in the sun, but it just kind of takes on a little bit more of a brown appearance, which is not a bad thing, I don't think, when it comes to moss. This is preserved moss. It's not living, so we don't have to mist it or anything like that. There's no maintenance there. So I'm going to be keeping these in the greenhouse for the next couple of weeks. They will probably only need water at this point, probably once a week when it's so cool still. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed seeing these come together. We have a lot more of these in the lineup for spring and summer. I just am so excited. This is the kickoff, you guys. Here we go. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.